Hello, how's everybody doing? Welcome back to the daily drill series. I say daily, it's more like weekly drills. This time we're going to be doing one of my more favoured spots, which is big blind versus early position cutoff, bet 70 flop. Let's just talk about this spot a little bit, but before I get into that, I just want to say today I'm going to be speaking as close to my mic as possible, so it's as good a volume as possible, so I don't have to use AI to crank up my volume artificially. So I'm hoping this sounds okay, but I am looking a little bit ridiculous here. I'm literally holding my mic so it's right at my face without it being in the way of my screen. So there we go. We'll do that today. So we'll just talk about the spot a little bit. On the right here, I've got some notes from my time practicing drilling. The reason I really like this line is when you're playing low stakes, micros, probably even up to mid stakes, depending on the player. But I think people do get to a certain level where they do start to like actually make their strategy better. But I think when you're playing low stakes, using the heuristics I developed is probably the most efficient way to play. In fact, I probably called a little too much on low stakes. But yeah, there is quite a lot going on in the B70 line. When it comes to the B70 line, there's a lot of stuff the solver's doing that reality isn't doing. And there's something that I use the term equity-driven range. This is a term used basically when the bluffing range has too much equity, or the overall betting range has too much equity. It could either be like the nuts or like a strong value hand, which is going to have like 80-90% equity, or it can be a draw with like 30% equity. And this just really like makes it difficult to play because your pairs just become massively devalued, because even when you're ahead of the draws you have way less equity, and the text is going to change, and your ability to realize equity decreases, your ability to bluff catch decreases, all of these things. So your overall EV decreases, so therefore your calling range should decrease. Overfolding is especially encouraged in this line, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about the heuristics. General heuristics we're going to call most top pair, asterisk, pair plus backdoor flush draw, 8 plus draws. So, just anything that has 8 out draws the nuts. You could potentially say that overcards could have draws, be draws, but I don't know. There's quite a lot going on. It's an argument. Most gut shots with backdoor flush draw, straight draw. I think I've talked about what I would call, without sounding rude, a nut shot. But basically what that means is a gut shot to the nuts, rather than just like what we call bad gutters or trash gutters, where they have like, you have a inside straight draw but it's to the bad end of the straight. So especially when their range has draws as well that go to the good end of the straight, these are like discouraged. Strong pocket pairs, so we're still going to call like good strong pocket pairs. I think more of the reasoning being behind these pairs, despite having poor playability, they are ahead of a decent amount of the range that is bluffing, and sometimes they can be ahead of value, sort of thing. On this board, for example, I would imagine the cutoff would sometimes bet a hand like ace 5, 6, 5. These sort of hands, ace 4. So that would be an example. 5 plus out pairs, that just means a pair to the board basically. But it does depend on like what overcards they have. So we talked about like pairs without backdoor flush draws, textures, formations. These are just some notes that I made earlier. So like on a 1 Broadway board we would call much more with these kind of hands, and on 2 Broadways we would call less. But there we go. And there's some note here, separate note about low and dry boards. We want strong overcards, overs with good backdoor flush draws, good backdoor straight draws, ace highs with backdoor flush draws, straight draws. So this would technically count as a lowish, dryish texture. And then raising range, this is a very simplified raising range, which I would probably encourage people to do in their game, is we're going to counter the too strong an equity strategy by raising our best hands and our best draws. The reason raising 8 plus draws, or like flush draws in general, I think works well against 70 is it allows you to realize your equity better. Where certain hands might mix in theory or like prefer not to raise, your equity realization becomes really poor when you have like a jack high 9-high flush draw. But if you do like a smallish raise size, it does do okay. Whereas sometimes when you start like doing these big raise sizes, say the board is, I don't know, king 10-6 and you raise 5-3 of flush draw, and you start going like for a huge raise with that kind of hand, the problem you have is their calling range is going to be built a decent amount out of strong flush draws. Whereas in this, when you do a smaller sizing, they're going to basically, I mean, they will still have flush draws, but you do get to essentially isolate yourself quite a lot to top pair kind of hands. I mean, you still do the same in when you do like a polarized strategy, but you see what I mean? Like you're keeping the pot kind of like under control. I'm not sure if what I said made any sense, but you'll realize basically you get to realize more equity. Yeah, and there's some general notes about what I said earlier. So without further ado, let's get into it. We talked about our heuristics before. What kind of hand is this? Well, we know this is low dry boardish. This sort of hand is a pair with a backdoor flush draw. It's not one of these like high card boards. So like we're going to continue. One question is, in theory, could we potentially raise this hand? That's a good question to ask yourself in these situations. I would generally say the pattern you would see in these sort of situations is you would possibly want to raise a little bit, but you'd want to have more playability around the backdoor straight. But you know, I know it's to continue, and I think that's the simplest way to play it. I think I've got a forehand on, which I don't think I want on. So we'll just change the settings. I do like to do forehand studies, so I like to study turn, river, you know, as if I'm just practicing, but today it's more about just like practicing the spot. So let's switch forehand on. So ace 9-3 obviously is ace high board. You don't often see this kind of sizing, but you do. I think there is like a pattern like of types of profiles that use this sizing on the flop on ace high boards. There are what I call the nits that literally have built their entire career on the mid stakes of betting 70% on ace 9-3, because if you think about how a calling range is constructed on this board by like weaker players, a weaker player wouldn't think twice about calling top pair here. So a nit would build their entire range around like flush draws and good top pair and sets, and they'd go 70, and then they would check back everything else. So then I would fold this versus a nit, but like obviously the standard would be to call. Obviously if you start to face overbet, because a nit wouldn't have this hand in their range, but if you start facing overbet in that line, you probably start folding that hand. I know it sounds crazy, but that is a way to think about it. I could probably node lock the spot and show you what I mean. Luckily there's a power of editing, so you don't have to go through it. A little look at this general strategy here. 70, a full screen is kind of bad. If I move this up a little bit and then move this down a bit, you will get to see the type of hands that would come into the range, like the mixing that has to be done by the AI. Like obviously there's a strong value range, 2 pair set, top pair, there's a mix of second pairs, under pairs, third pairs, low pairs, king high, which I assume is like flush, but you can see there's even stuff like king 4 of clubs in there, low pair, etc. And all this, despite you always call top pair, but like let's look at 9x, you always call 9x, 9-5 of clubs even, And you start to fold things like queen 3 of clubs, 6-3 of clubs, these kind of hands. Maybe you start to raise some of the ones that you can play around with the backdoor straight. Even king 3 starts to be indifferent. And most of the rest of the raising range is just calling range is just like flush draws, and then the pocket pairs around this. You're still calling like a strong one like jacks or tens. They're sometimes betting jacks or tens with a spade, I assume to give bluffs on multiple runouts, and then just the pocket pairs start to fold up until without a spade around 8s, and then down here you can see how the range kind of works. When we start to node lock, let's use the power of editing to speed forward. Okay, so we've edited the range down. We've done quite a bit of work. What we've done is we've kind of made the top of the range set to pair top pair very heavy. We've got a lot of combo draws in there, ace-x, etc. And then what we've done is we've really eliminated the second pairs, under pairs from the range. We've kept 2s in there, quite natural 2s, and we kept king 3, solid natural. We've just totally eliminated the mixing of like queen jack offsuits without a spade. We kept in like king 4 of hearts and stuff like this. But yeah, we started to just eliminate these jack 7s and all of that stuff. And yeah, we completely replaced the bluffing range with backdoor flush draws or flush draws only. And what this has done, and get rid of like 4s, 5s, 6s and these kind of hands. And what this has done is it's created this kind of defense, 63% fold, massive overfold to MDF. But if you look at the cutoff equity in this general spot, range v range is 55 to 45. You can see here. But what the betting range of cutoff equity is 61%, and the BB range is about 39% versus that one. So you see what I mean by equity driven ranges. Even though it has an equity advantage, the actual betting range of the cutoff is really dominating the equity. It's 61% equity, and this just really like increases the amount you have to fold. We're still calling top pairs in this line, but like we don't entertain a call with jacks without a spade, or just any 10 pocket 10s combos against this. Like 9x, just mix and fold. I mean, it'd probably be much simpler to play without calling these hands, because like there's also the turn and the river to think about. Like, how do we bluff? What happens on turn? What happens on the river? Well, you know that on a spade they'll barrel all of these combos, but then maybe they'll start to check some of them more strong combos. I'm talking about the cutoff here, so they'll barrel all of these on a spade. On a heart they'll barrel all of these, and maybe they'll barrel the ones of these that have the heart in them. So there's a lot of aggression coming in on the flush draw board. They will probably slow down a little bit with some of their weaker top pairs and stuff. Yeah, it's basically how are you going to realize equity. Let's go even further. Now we're talking about an extreme nit. I've cut it. But what I've done is I've locked out all of the king 4 of hearts. I've completely massively lowered the frequency of like these backdoor flush draws with the spade in general, just betting. I've basically reduced 2s to half the time. I've kept the frequency of flush draws basically the same. And this is what the result is. 86% folding, and we're even folding ace-8. So when I said I would fold to a nit, I wasn't exaggerating. This is your defense range. I mean, there's a lot of raising here because it just finds raising as like the better line against like super strong equity range. Because like anytime he does have a draw and we have like ace-8, but you see the range that's continuing here is just like all not potential. You're folding ace jack of clubs. The strategy is this: ace jack plus, flush draw plus, and a little bit of like backdoor flush draw pocket 2s, you know, kind of thing. And let's look at the equities again. The betting range of the cutoff equity is 74%, and the BB range is 26%. We're just so screwed here. We can't continue ace jack That's how strong the nit range is. And this is very extreme, but there are probably players who play micro stakes, maybe even low stakes, that play like this. So yeah, just be aware of who you're playing, basically. The way to exploit this line is quite simple. They check, just random turn, make it an 8, and they have a massively unprotected range. We get to do quite a lot of probing. The AI is now perfectly balanced, and like, say we just had a 30% size here, or let's just say we have a 32% size in here, and a 0%, but like, imagine they don't call a hand like Jack 8 of, well, they would call Jack 8 of diamonds, but you know what I mean. Imagine they didn't call Jack 7, which is a gut shot. I mean, they would call these hands, I guess, but King Highs, pocket 4s, they just fold these hands. You're gonna see like you're gonna see some stuff. So they just start folding these hands, basically. They don't raise any hands because then it's, you know, they call all of their gut shots. They're passive. They start to mix folding a 3. You know, these sort of things. They're not going to ever entertain a raise with an ace. Yeah, you know, they might actually, because I've seen it. They would raise 2 pair though. They would raise 2 pair. Strong top pair that they have. They're going to fold King High. Obviously not the flush draw, so let's exclude the spade. But yeah, they're going to fold King High, basically. And they're not going to raise an 8, they're just going to call an 8 that isn't 2 pair. This is 2 pair. We change their strategy. Now it's folding 25%. But now we have a massive preference. This is a very small overfold, by the way. It's like folding weak pairs in King High. But now we have a massive preference towards just blocking almost our entire range. And that is the power of exploiting nits. And this is a strategy I did on NL100 extremely successfully for like 2 years. Anyway, we'll go back to the drills. Okay, we now have Jack 7 and we have a gut shot. Now we talked about like raising 8+ draws, not gut shots. So like here, the reason I'd advise calling these hands is if you know how to like play leads into your strategy on the turn, calling makes more sense, because when you start raising, you tend to like, because people don't have like the, you know, here there's probably going to be like some rassle of stuff like ace 3 of suited or something, just random trash basically into the range, king, queen, jack, or is a gut shot late, just random stuff like that. I know in theory this hand would sometimes raise, probably raise a little bit more of a 9, but I prefer to just call this kind of hand. And then if it goes into the check node, we just have a great bluffing opportunity. Wow, it's just a pure fold. Huh. We go, because I saw, you know, I see Gallo has a backdoor flush draw, it has a backdoor straight draw. Sorry, I mean, it has a backdoor flush draw, sorry. I just, you know, I also call it, but like, it would probably make sense to fold it, or just raise it. But fine, it's not a mistake, big mistake really, if it is a mistake. So these low paired boards, we want overs with good backdoor flush draws, straight draws, or just really, you know, ace high as a backdoor flush draw, straight draws. This one doesn't actually hit the category of that, so I'd actually fold this hand. And you can see it does do a little bit of call, a little bit of raise, which is quite interesting, I think, to do a little bit of raise with a hand like this. It's not something I would necessarily incorporate into my game, but like I'm certainly looking at something like a7 offsuit probably isn't in my range here, but that would make sense as a raise to me. But maybe 2.3x. A lot of people do 2.2x from the cutoff, so these days instead of 2.3x, I guess I would have some of these like a7 off type hands in my range, so I would probably raise that like more than this hand if I was going to raise there. Yeah, so we talked about like these 8+ draws. This hand could raise. Let's just click the raise button. Obviously, can go either way. King 10. I mean, the thing about ace-9 is that ace-9 will always realize equity really nicely in this line as a call, whereas like a weaker draw, like a jack, 9, a spade won't do as well. So yeah, there's that. So this is the type of low draw card. We have the we have an over. We have overs with a good backdoor flush draw, straight draw, etc. It's kind of a low board. It's not a super dry board. It's like pretty what they would call wet. So what that means is there's no straights, but it's connected. I think I would still fold this hand and focus more on my ace of spades combos. There is not a huge amount of connectivity around the 9, even though we have 2 overcards. They're not the strongest overcards. I do think you can get in trouble calling hands like this in this kind of spot. I think obviously versus a smaller bet we would continue. It wouldn't surprise me if in theory you maybe sometimes continue this as a raise. Okay. In Jack 9 we have the paired board, the queen whatever board. We have the open ender, so we will never be folding. The question is, do we want to raise our hand? I think I would raise this hand more often than not, looking to like realize our equity a little bit better. King 10. Oh, so we have the gut shot. We don't have the backdoor flush draw, but we do have the overcard. We're still going to be continuing this King 10. It does draw to the nuts, which is pretty nice. I think we could also do a little bit of raising with the hand, but we'll stick to a call. You can see it's actually like mix and fold in the sim. So if you wanted to just pure fold that hand, you didn't feel confident about playing the turn, it's fine. Not a problem. Here we have the combo draw, open ender, straight flush draw, as they say. Obviously never folding. The question is, do you want to raise this? Because like the bigger size here is obviously like a stronger value range. I think the reality is the population will have like some interest in hands. I think players are good enough on certain stakes to bet things like deuces, threes, fours here. So I would favor a small raise to make them fold like now, but like we can just still call and like we still are in a good spot. We do isolate ourselves a little bit by raising, because a lot of their continuing range is like this king jack, king queen type hand. But I don't mind mixing either option. I think they're both viable. Seven four. This is a purely trash. It's the first time we've had a pure trash hand actually in 9 hands. 10s. This is another interesting hand. Obviously this is a overpair with a straight draws and a backdoor flush draw, so we're never folding. I'm just going to pure call the hand. The value range here has got to be including 9x. Sometimes I would guess, but it's quite a connected board, and we have like 10-7 pretty much more often than he does, if I recall. Maybe he opens it a little bit, but yeah, certainly 7-5 suited. So like, again, wouldn't be surprised if his hand's sometimes raised, because I think you could possibly barrel him off of like overpairs in this line with the 10s, 10 of spades. Like if you could possibly barrel him off of a hand like pocket jacks or queens with no spade, he'll no flush run out. But yeah, we'll just stick to call. It's a simple way of playing the hand. This is a wheel hand. We just don't have anything good. We have a very bad backdoor straight draw. On mono board, these type of textures, you don't often see these sizings on the textures. Your general defense in these spots versus a small bet is going to be, you know, pairs, gut shots, flush draws of any strength, any pair basically, and then like ace queen, ace king, maybe a little bit of like ace 10. We're not talking about the spade combos, just these sort of hands, maybe a little bit of king queen. No, that would be against small. Against the biggest size, you just eliminate all of the like, basically the strong stuff, like without the backdoor flush draw. So you're only having like flush draws and pairs, and you probably can start to think about folding some of the like 8s and maybe 9s of a spade, without a spade, and 10s possibly, but like probably calling 10s, and then you just maybe you call like 6s and 7s with backdoor straight, and possibly raise some deuces and three then just still. Anyway, I'm talking about that. Like I'm just guessing. It's fun to do that. Our hand's just nothing. So yeah, let's see how accurate I am. It's always good to sort of guess what the strategy is in theory. Yeah, have a look. Obviously, there was like nothing to be said about all of the hands, as we predicted. I mean, ace king. I mentioned ace king, but ace king isn't in your range, so it doesn't really matter. But I mentioned things like king queen. These is against a small bet. I'd imagine they just call versus a smaller bet, and also it's more often a range bet. Okay, I was a bit wrong. Okay, usually the bet is about 25 to 20% though, so I guess against those sizes you could probably call them. But yeah, you can see ace queen is calling against 30%. I guess the 25% bet you'd call them a little bit. I mean, pure folding them can't be a mistake, but they are range betting often in those lines, so maybe it's better to call. I don't know, I'm kind of waffling at this point. But now the bigger size, yeah, we are actually, yeah, folding 10s without, 9s without, 8s without, and I guess 7s and 6s might start to continue, but even then I'm overcalling, and like maybe raise these hands. I thought maybe you'd want to raise a little bit with like 3s, no backdoor, or 6s, no backdoor, but I was wrong about that. We're just not raising in general that much here. At least in theory, it might be a good strategy exploitatively. But like the problem is when you bet this size is you're up against a range that is like 2 pair plus usually, over pair with spades. So maybe it's bad to just raise these hands in general if you think about it from a practical sense. Okay, king 10, ace jack 8. We have the gut shot. We have the backdoor flush draw. I actually think this hand's gonna. I'm still gonna continue this hand. I do think this hand's actually a lot closer than it seems. It's not a very good backdoor flush. King of spades is a snap call, but I'm still gonna continue. Yeah, closer. 6-3. Now this is where it gets interesting. Now we're on like this 2 Broadway board. And we have the third pair, weak kicker with a backdoor flush draw. And I would go ahead and say, I would think playing this as a raise or a fold is better than playing it as a call, because it's not a strong flush draw. And raising, you can like at least possibly barrel him off of some ace queen or ace jack. You know, you can do a call by like jack 10, queen 10, you know, all these kind of hands. It's going to work a little differently in theory, because in theory, I think raising, he's going to have like things like queen 8 of diamonds, and then you just snap fold in this line. So yeah, I would like raising as like a kind of line, or just fold in this hand if I was going to play it. And then we get 3-bet on the flop. I think this is the most easy fold in the world. Yeah, the raising isn't liked by the solver. I kind of like it, potentially, depending on how aggressive you are, how much they 3-bet. I don't think folding is absurd. I would advise players don't raise this hand in general, and just like low stakes, just fold. Get out of there. I'm going to make this my last hand, ace jack, and I'm just going to call. There's not much to discuss about that. We're obviously dominating the value range. Quite interested in it. It just skipped me straight to a new hand, which was way more interesting. 5-3. It's obviously a gut shot, but it's a gut shot to the nuts, but it's a flush draw board. Actually, it's not a gut shot to the nuts, but he doesn't have. If a 4 comes on the turn, he doesn't have the 8-5 suited. Although some of the players he play against might have 8-5 suited because they're open way too wide. Especially if you face a 2x open, sometimes players are going to turn out with 8-5 suited there. So like, we talked about like not having it. We talked about having a gut shot to the nuts. This is still a gut shot to the nuts because he doesn't have 8-5 suited in his range. However, it doesn't have a backdoor flush draw. And that is a concern to me, but it is a low board. So I think this is a sort of hand we can probably like decide there's 3 ways we can play it. We can call the hand and look to bluff this hand on most runouts. Certainly any non-spade runout would definitely be good, but even in a bet check bet line and a spade comes on the turn, I think it's still a good spot to bluff, because they would often bet when they hit a flush on the turn and not checking a flushes back, so we have a good bluffing opportunity. We can just fold it because this hand's going to do a pretty poor job of realizing equity, or we can raise it and look to attack, because he's going to have flush draws that we can make fold on brick runouts, but we can get called by on the turn. We can pretty pressure over pairs in his range. So it just really depends how you feel about bluffing. You know, are players capable of folding over pairs in this line? I don't know. What would I do in game? I'd probably mix the options if I wasn't sure. So let's just fold. We have been told not to fold the hand, but I don't think it's bad to do it against population. Yeah, I'm going to end the video there. Just basically really need to go to the bathroom. I think I got enough content for today, so I wish everyone the best of luck. I actually think this line is just super interesting because I definitely need to update my heuristics a little bit. But I just think the way you can play this line against low stakes is you can be a massive net here if you want to, or you can just be a psychopath and just go like really bluff crazy in certain lines. But like when I mean bluff crazy, I mean you have to check raise the flop, bet the turn, jam the river as a bluff, and like really attack a very obvious range that is over pairs and flush draws. This is a spot where you could attack that like heavily. So you can go from being a massive nit to a massive psychopath. I probably advise just being a nit, to be honest. It's better for the peace of mind, but it's quite fun sometimes to be crazy. Anyway, good luck everybody. See you next time.